Welcome. Thanks so much for being with us. If you're in Atlanta, it's good afternoon. If you're in Texas, I hope you're enjoying your lunch. And if you're in California, thanks for spending your late morning with us. But we're excited to have everyone today so that we can spend a little bit of time talking about a subject that's very important to us all the time, but has become even more the importance of it has become even more elevated over the last several weeks as we've been in this global pandemic and have kind of started navigating our way through it. I'm Bob Rogers with Street Grace, and for those of you that aren't familiar, we're a not-for-profit that works around the country, and our single mission is to eradicate the commercial sexual exploitation of children. We do that by all of our programs resting on one of three pillars, and that is prevention and protection of children, policy, working on state level and national policy, and then pursuit. And that is the pursuit of the buyers of sex and the traffickers who would be engaged in this. Our work right now, as you probably already suspect and we'll hear more of today, is in a greater need and is probably as important, if not more important, than it's ever been in the history of this cause. And our survivor community simultaneously are probably experiencing the greatest disruption and are in greater need right now than at any time prior. And so given the nature of the global pandemic, the coronavirus, and the issues that we all see and face, we are seeing the greatest need at a time when, quite frankly, the world is as distracted as it's probably ever been. And that is just not just the attention, but even the donor attention that coronavirus has garnered, and appropriately so, from many other worthy causes. What we're seeing amongst the COVID-19 pandemic is, this issue through three things, and that is the demand, which is the buyers and the consumers are temporarily disrupted, with unemployment numbers expected to possibly even peak above 30%, and there being more families at home and people out of work or off work with greater levels of individual accountability. So it's no question, it's created some demand issues and challenges for the buyers and the consumers of sex. The supply side, those who have been victimized and are being victimized by this, is at a market saturation level. There are more people right now that are out there who are being trafficked and exploited than the demand, and there's a greater risk of violence and a higher risk of high-risk behavior occurring. And then the distribution side of things, when you talk about the traffickers and the websites, there's never been probably a worse time to be a trafficker, if you were to think of it that way. And that's a terrible phrase, but I want you to get the picture of the fact that demand is down, supply is up, and many of the behaviors that are occurring right now are at a higher risk with higher demands and higher expectations than ever before. One bright side in all of it is the illicit massage business, which we know is approximately a $3 billion issue here in the US, with 9,000 or 10,000 illicit massage parlors in places, spas around the country, are probably in large extent, estimates are 80 to 90% of them have at least temporarily shuttered their doors as a result of the COVID crisis. So with all of this being a bigger issue, or as big an issue as it has been in the past, and this being right here, right now, something that we're walking through, we thought it would be a terrific idea to have a conversation that could be helpful to parents and adults who are paying attention to or responsible for kids and children at this time, probably even more so than ever, and going forward. And so it's a great honor for us to be joined by Alia El-Sawi, who is from Homeland Security Investigations, to spend some time with us today. We've attempted to collect as many questions as we could in advance for Aliyah, but this is an issue that has really struck a chord with an awful lot of people. So we will not get to all of your questions, but we have tried to group them together in a way that could be most helpful. If at the end of this, there's still something that wasn't addressed so that you feel is an important issue for you, please don't hesitate to drop us a note and we will do it. But without further ado, let me tell you a little bit of background about our guest today and why I'm so honored and privileged to have her with us. Alia El-Sawi is the Victims Assistant Specialist for Homeland Security Investigations, and she covers the states of Georgia and Alabama. In this capacity, she designs and provides educational trainings and outreach to law enforcement, attorneys, mainstream service providers, community-based organizations, and on human trafficking and child exploitation. She's also involved in conducting interviews with those who have been victimized and connecting victims with services. Additionally, she's a recipient of Georgia Trend's Top 40 Under 40 for her career accomplishments. She's traveled all over the world. She's traveled overseas to train foreign governments on human trafficking. She's been in Chile, Peru, Brazil, Hong Kong, Macau, Vietnam, and most recently in Budapest. Not to be outdone, Aliyah, I have been in Alabama recently. So she also, fortunately for everyone, we will do this in English because of my limitations, but Aliyah speaks Arabic and French, Spanish. She's conversational in Portuguese, has her bachelor's degree from Mercer University in International Affairs and French, and has a master's degree from Boston University in Criminal Justice with a focus in victimology. So if we were live, Aliyah, we would stand to our feet and applaud, but we're not. So I'm just going to tell you, thanks so much for being here. And it's an honor to have you join us.
Thank you so much, Bob. It's an honor of mine to be here. And I want to thank you and Kamala and Street Grace for allowing me this opportunity. Originally, you know, I kind of had, I guess it was weighing on me a little bit, just thinking, being home, quarantined, sheltering in place, and it just kept dawning on me, you know, there are so many kids out there that are at home, schools are canceled, and with this pandemic going on, I figured what way to better educate parents and eventually the children to allow them the opportunity to learn more about internet safety and how they can protect themselves. So I thank you and Kamala and Street Grace for allowing this platform for me. I originally had the thought of just doing like a live Facebook feed from my home in my home office, but this worked out much better. So thank you for that.
No, thrilled to have you here. So let's just kind of walk through a couple of things. Obviously your background and your pedigree is exceptional. But can you break that down a little bit for us for people that are like, okay, in simple terms, what does that mean that you do and I know there's probably no such thing as a typical week, but what do you do in a typical week or a month? What is your job and the team that you work with?
Well, actually, you say team, and I want to start off by saying that my day-to-day work, I can't do it alone. I have a wonderful support, whether it be my husband and my family and kids at home or my coworkers. I work with an amazing team that is very supportive of what I do. And obviously, this work couldn't be done without our partners such as Street Grace and other nonprofits out there, our local, state, and federal partners that combat child exploitation. So let me start off by saying that I'm forever grateful that you all make my work easier. But day in and day out, really, it does not look the same. I wish that, you know, I could say I wake up and this is my normal routine, but my day may be anything as boring as cranking out reports and putting together statistics to capture the numbers that we're seeing either locally or statewide or even nationally. Some days I'm out doing outreach trainings, presentations at schools, at universities for attorneys to educate the public on child exploitation and human trafficking. And then there are the days that get to be a little bit longer and tougher, and that's the more hands-on work that we do, and that's being out in the field and going out on operations, whether they're child exploitation or child pornography operations that we do, or sex trafficking cases. And those can be, you know, those can weigh heavy on you, but those are longer days. Those are reminders of why we do what we do. So in short, I guess, there's no typical day, I guess, for me. I could be getting up at 3 a.m. And responding to a call that we have, you know, a victim that's awaiting resources that needs to be put in a shelter that may have been abandoned by family members, or I could be behind my desk working on trying to get an undocumented victim of sex trafficking or labor trafficking employment authorization, so they can have that as an additional resource to work and strive here in the United States. So that's the complicated answer, I guess.
Yeah, no. I get it. It's not an easy work, and it's not a one-dimensional thing for sure. How did you wind up in this line of work, Aliyah? Was this a master career strategic plan, or was this a journey and a path that kind of led to this? Talk a little bit about how you wound up here.
I would definitely lean more towards journey. I knew that I wanted to do something. Actually, it wasn't until I would say my last year of undergrad that I started to realize that I wanted to do something that was human rights based, perhaps something where I could assist women and children, maybe assist vulnerable populations like the immigrant or refugee communities. And I decided that I was going to wait before going back to school and try to get some field work. And I started off working at a nonprofit, non-governmental organization called Tapestry. And they're an excellent, reputable organization based out of Atlanta, Georgia, but they provide services for neighboring states. And they have programs in human trafficking and domestic violence and sexual assault. So had a little bit of that background. And then I transitioned into the federal government because I was working a lot with law enforcement and referring the survivors that we worked with of trafficking, and basically helping coach them so that they could come forward and report their cases to law enforcement. And so I was approached by Homeland Security about my position, and definitely seized that opportunity.
Okay, so great. Thank you very much. Interestingly enough, not probably, more than any other time in history, we've actually seen over the last several weeks or couple of months, Aliyah, kids literally being forced online because of school closures and all of the things that have just occurred around the country. Sadly enough, that has also caused more and more buyers and sexual predators and things like that to focus their attention online during this quarantine. Certainly it was occurring to a large extent prior to, certainly it will occur afterwards. But we're in this window of time where we've all kind of been pointed in a particular direction. So that's what we're here to talk about today. I want to start off by just saying, I know this can be a broad question, but are there typical ages of kids, youth, and teen when they're most susceptible or vulnerable of falling prey to predators online?
I get that question a lot, and really the short answer is any age, so from 0 to 18. But typically we see that kids that fall prey to online victimization or are preyed upon by these predators online, it's usually when they first have access to social media of some sort, or perhaps a phone, tablet, desktop, laptop. So when they have access is really when it becomes a little bit more active. But when I reference the younger ages, say for instance, toddlers, that type of, victimization is a little bit different. So it's when parents or family members may post, and innocently, I must say, may post pictures of their children during bath time, or their child running off, without a diaper on in the sprinklers or splash pad of some sort. And to us, it seems completely innocent. To these predators, however, it's quite different. They see it as an opportunity. And it's, again, even the pictures that we post every year, you see the cute pictures on social media of kids going into their first day of school. So you may have a sign and it has the kid's name, it has the teacher's name, what grade they're going into, what school. Well, as a predator, that's just providing all sorts of information. It's actually, it's quite easy to take all of that information that's on that cute little sign that you've spent so much time on and quickly look into where that child is living and kind of starting up that preying upon that we're talking about today. So again, it can be kids of various ages, and I know we'll kind of talk about it a little bit more, and we'll talk about the gaming and the social media presence. But at the end of the day, parents, it can be any age. So just be cautious and remember that.
So you raised a really good point. And we got some questions around this from parents who were kind of specifically addressing their current life situation. So how do we see this different, especially in probably the middle school and high school groupings of kids? Does this process of targeting children, does it look different for a middle schooler versus a high schooler, or is it really the same thing, the same script with just a couple of different, tactics?
So it can look the same and it can look a little bit different. So I guess it depends on who the predator is. Some of these predators may not have a specific age group that they target. We've had plenty that we have arrested and charged that really have no specific age. But I would say the middle school ages, there's a little bit more of the kids being a little bit more naive. They are a little bit more impressionable. But in high school, you kind of transition into that, I guess I'm becoming more self-sufficient. I'm on my way to, going to college or starting work one day. So you have a little bit of that difference there, but the approach has certainly similarities. The predators know who they're targeting. And when I say that, I mean, they know what they're going after. They certainly do their homework in terms of finding out what these kids' interests are, what sporting events they're attending, who they're friends with, the school that they attend. So they really kind of cater towards the middle school mindset. And then they also will cater towards the high schooler's mindset, what a typical high schooler may be into, with whether it be homecoming or prom or anything like that. Whereas the middle schooler, it may be, a little bit more focused on some of the silly applications where you can kind of change your, what you look like Snapchat or anything like that. It's a little bit more wholesome, if you will, but they know that and they prey upon that.
Okay, so that's really helpful. Are there particular types of kids that they target? And again, I understand in many of the questions, if not all of the questions we'll ask today, the answer is yes, and it's always and, never either or. But generally speaking, so I'm not trying to force you into a narrow lane that's inappropriate. Generally speaking, what areas of vulnerability or risk make someone a greater target?
Well, this is unfortunately a crime that can victimize any child. So I always say it doesn't matter how old the child is, whether they're male or female. And hopefully I'll have an opportunity to kind of outline some of the cases that we've dealt with and can talk about how some girls have been approached versus boys. But it doesn't matter their education level, their background. It doesn't matter whether they come from a what you may refer to as a broken home, where there may be some form of abuse that they've been privy to before, whether it's against them or another family member. So there, again, like you said, there is no specific type of child that they prey upon. We have seen that a lot of the kids that are chatting online or engage with some of these predators, the predators are very good about developing that rapport, getting to know the child, and then basically the child eventually feels comfortable to where they start opening up about certain things going on, whether it's mom and dad have been, fighting, whether it's, my cousin touched me inappropriately, whether it's, my mom is using drugs, anything like that. So they really take that opportunity to, I guess, initially act like there's someone that is interested in caring, and they initially will basically pull them in that way, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah,
And
no, it makes great sense.
and just remember too, these predators, the kids aren't necessarily knowing who they're talking to, right? They don't necessarily think that or know that it is a 46-year-old man, or it's a 28-year-old man or even woman. They may think it's someone completely different.
So you've mentioned it, and it's come up a couple of times. One of the areas that we've probably got more questions on, there were two. One of them would be this: talk a little bit about. You mentioned Snapchat. I know that Kick is a program we hear a lot about, an application. We've TikTok is one where it feels like it was designed for middle school and high schoolers, but yet it's become one of the most sexualized platforms out there. Talk a little bit about your experience and what you have seen and what you know about some of these platforms, and then move that into, so what can we do about it? I mean, we can't, practically speaking, we can't check our kids' phones every single night. And even if we did, there's always a workaround. But talk about how those platforms are utilized and how we need to be wise, and then maybe we can talk a little bit how to protect ourselves and our children.
Well, I'm thankful at the end of all of this, we have kind of put some resources together. So I've created a comprehensive list of social media and applications for parents to be on the lookout for. I'm not saying all of them are bad. I myself am a user of several of these social media platforms. We have seen it from anywhere of, the most common, like Facebook Messenger, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, as you mentioned, to some that you might kind of say, oh, I never really thought about it, but Pinterest, Tumblr, WhatsApp. You mentioned Kick. We've gotten so many leads from Kick and Kick Flirt, which is an affiliate of Kick. So sadly, any type of social media can be used in a manner in which it's not supposed to be used, meaning it can be a space where these predators find some of the loopholes. And if there are kids that are present on these applications or social media, they will find a way to them, unfortunately. So what parents can do specifically, because I know at the end of this, you may think, oh gosh, my kid has a tablet, or they have a phone, or they have some of these applications or, social media that I've allowed them on. What am I doing something wrong? No. And the simple answer is you just have to make sure that you're monitoring it. And by monitoring it, I mean, allowing the kids certain times that they can be on it, realizing that kids a lot of times will have separate screen names. So they may have a screen name that is known to the parents, and then another screen name that they're utilizing for things that they may not want their parents to necessarily know about. Any type of hidden type of applications, like the calculator app that has the percentage sign. A lot of times that's not a calculator app, or some of the apps that you can hide pictures or videos or even messages in. Those are ones to be on the lookout for. And again, I have a comprehensive list that kind of outlines all of those, but the parents just need to be vigilant. I always say, I understand we try to respect our kids' privacy, especially as they get older, but the reality of it is you should know what your child is doing. You should familiarize yourself with some of the apps that they've recently downloaded. You should be asking about their passwords to some of these, even if they're on a gaming device. A lot of these gaming devices, whether it's Fortnite or Roadblock or Call of Duty, a lot of them are online based. You may be talking to someone else on the other end that you do not realize who that individual is, and they could be getting information and actually preying upon your child. So disable those chats. So there are things that you can do, even if it's daily checks. At the end of the day, have your kid give you their tablets, their phones, and go through them, and that's okay. That's part of it, or at least should be part of the agreement. I'm giving you this tablet or I'm giving you this phone, but I also reserve the right to look at it, and it's for your safety. And hopefully I can also explain that and relay that message to the kids when we do these future trainings for the different age groups. At the end of the day, parents, don't beat yourself up about what you have or haven't done so far. Just understand that it's okay to be nosy.
I think you just raised so many really good points that would merit almost unpacking them individually. But I'm really grateful for a couple of things that you said. One of them is, if this misrepresents the way you intended it, correct me on it. But we tell parents all the time, it's really important that parents parent. And it's also really important that parents feel the freedom and the luxury and establish this boundaries, I guess, if you will, that allows them. It's a natural part of you providing a mobile device and a cell phone to your child for you to have access to that. It doesn't mean you yank it out of their hand at the dinner table and you say, what crazy thing have you done today? But if you have a charging station where everybody in the family, including the parents, leave their devices to charge so that we're all kind of playing by the same rules, then it's very easy. I mean, one of the things we did with our kids was we said, you can have all of these apps. We just get your password and we are a friend. And if either of those two things ever changes, then you have lost the right to use the device or the application. And I know parents can't solve everything, but it's what's really hard is when your child's 17 and you haven't had these conversations. How do you start them then? So speak to that as a human being, a law officer, a mother, and a wife. What would you say to parents, practically speaking? How and when, age appropriately, should these types of conversations that grow begin? Based on what you've seen and in your experience?
Sure. Well, I guess let me start off by saying, is taking kids off of social media the answer? And the answer is no. The last thing you want to do is ostracize them and have them feel left out and feel like they can't be a part of what their friends are a part of. I would say, again, exercise caution with that, because you have to remember, at least in my case, we didn't necessarily grow up with social media being everywhere, having these apps on our phones, and having the internet or online presence so readily available. But our kids have. This is what they've grown up with. This is what they know. This is their norm, and this is the environment that we're living in today. And so to take that away is not necessarily the answer. But you want to create a space where your child will feel comfortable if they were approached by someone. And I'll say this, and I know that it may come as a surprise, but it is likely that your child has already been approached by an online predator at some point in time, either approached already or will be approached. It is that rampant. It is that prevalent. We get all the time where people will say, well, not my kid, my child, we grew up in a religious home, or my child is so smart, they know better, or my child would never do that. I'm telling you, every single day, it's heartbreaking, but we have people from various backgrounds and kids that really are good kids that really are smart kids. But at the end of the day, they fell prey to these predators because this is what they do. They're that good at it. And in terms of creating that safe space that I was talking about,
Yeah.
it's again okay to check in with your child, let them know that there are people online that may say they are a certain person, or may act like they're a friend of yours, or may act like they know some of your friends in your circle of friends, or some of your friends that are on your sports team. But the reality of it is, it's not. And a lot of these kids actually develop relationships. When I say relationships, I mean they have been in communication with these predators for quite some time. So it can be anywhere from, a few weeks to, most commonly, months, sometimes years. And so, again, they've developed this friendship, maybe even relationship with these folks. And so creating that space where your child feels comfortable saying, hey, mom, dad, teacher, whoever they feel comfortable talking to, I've been communicating with this person online, and it got to the point where I'm uncomfortable now. And I would say the last thing you want to do is victim blaming, because unfortunately we get a lot of the parents that want to basically conduct their own investigation, do their own questioning. They want to reprimand their kids. They want to take everything away. That's what we think of as an immediate response, when in actuality, what you're doing is you're pushing them a little bit further. And so you want to have them be able to feel comfortable and build that trust, and trust that you're not going to be upset with them or do any type of victim blaming, because after all, they're kids, right? And like I said, they're impressionable. And at the end of the day, the predators are the ones that are committing these crimes. We don't want to criminalize our own kids. They're victims at the end of the day. So, like I said, there are a lot of resources that we have that we'll share with everyone later on. And I think that parents can kind of get to know some of those resources as well, and sit down with your kids and have that conversation. And it can be uncomfortable, and it should be a little uncomfortable, quite frankly. But what's not uncomfortable is having your child have that trust to where they can come to you if something were to happen, or if they were approached in some manner.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Aliyah. That's very helpful. And what I like the most about it is it's just practical. So it's where we live. This is stuff, and the stuff you're talking about, that's things we can do today and tomorrow. We don't have to study anymore. We don't have to do any more research. We don't have to attend any more webinars. Those are all good. But we can, we say all the time, just begin a series of awkward conversations.
Yes.
You don't have to be an expert at any of this. What you're doing is you're opening up lines of communications so that in the event anything ever occurred, a child feels comfortable coming to you before the fact and
Right.
before something can be done. I know I knew this would happen. You and I talked about it. There is no way we're going to get through even half of the questions.
That's fine.
I do want to ask you a couple of things. Can you give just, I know you have to be careful with the information. Can you give some practical examples of maybe cases that you've worked, or how an innocent decision at one point, or just an uninformed decision wound up leading down a pathway that less than good things could occur?
Of course. So we see all different types of cases, and I would say, I'll share with you, we've had a couple of what we call sextortion cases.
Yeah.
So you may be familiar with the term, some of you may not, and that's totally fine. It is a newer term, and that's exactly what it sounds like. Someone basically may be chatting with your child online, and again, various age ranges, and will start building that rapport. So in one case in particular, this gentleman, he was in his 20s at the time, and he specifically was targeting girls from the age of 13 to 16. And what he was doing was basically he'd find their screen name, and they could be on one type of social media site, but then he would go through and look up the kids using that screen name on some of the other social media sites that we commonly use. This one in particular started off on Kick Messenger, or Kick Flirt as well. But he used Facebook, he used Facebook Messenger, he used Twitter, and I believe he also used Snapchat. And he was an absolute monster. So there were hundreds of victims involved in this case, but we were only able to reach a certain number because we weren't able to recover enough information to identify some of the other victims. But with these cases, as we find victims along the way, then even after the case is done and over with, we certainly still refer to them as victims and put them in touch with the resources that they deserve and need. And in this particular case, he would start off, again, finding some type of commonality. And then he got to know some of these girls and their friends and would reference some of the other girls, and knew those that played volleyball and what school, knew information even about the parents, because eventually he reached out to parents, grandparents, aunts, and he started off kind of making them feel like it was a romantic relationship, and then ended up taking advantage of that. And once the girls felt comfortable, because they thought, they didn't know he was an adult, they thought that it was an individual that was around their age. In fact, he wasn't necessarily using his picture. He never once revealed what he really looked like, his real name or anything like that. He had a number of other user IDs or usernames that he was using. And he had a very good way of finessing these girls. And then eventually it started to become very aggressive. So much so that these young girls developed all sorts of psychological issues. We had, when we went to trial on this one particular case, all of the girls, with the exception of 2, had suicidal ideation. They either had suicidal thoughts or attempts. A lot of them harmed themselves. A lot of them are, to this day, still broken because of what this man has done to them. He completely destroyed them. He stripped their innocence. And then basically where the sextortion part comes in is that he would make them eventually take provocative pictures of themselves, perhaps just in undergarments, and then eventually it developed into nude pictures, and then pictures of them masturbating, and then took those images, those videos, even some of the messages, and said, if you don't continue to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to send these videos, pictures, messages to your father, to your grandmother. And he did just that. I'm going to post this on very well-known porn sites. And he did just that. And so that's what sextortion in a nutshell looks like. And not just one case that we've worked on, but another case that I'm currently working on. We get these types of cases all the time. A girl that is a teen, she is, in that mode of exploring herself, identifying, who she is, and there's a lot of curiosity there. And thinking that she maybe has developed a friend, a possible relationship, trusted him, and he completely stripped each one of these girls from that. Another case, and this just goes to tell you that boys are susceptible to this crime, absolutely 100%. Because when I get people that say, oh, girl, high school girl or middle school girl, no, not necessarily. We had a very large case a couple of years back where this particular individual, he was, I believe in his 50s, he was Skyping with some of the boys. The boys were I would say middle school to high school aged. And he basically portrayed himself as a girl of that age. And when these boys are, going through puberty and seeing that there's an attractive female that's interested in talking to them, they develop that relationship. They think they are talking to a girl that is interested to them. They don't know that this 50-plus-year-old man is on the other end. And so, again, curiosity sets in, and so this individual was asking the boys for explicit photos, videos, and the boys would do it. And then it got out. And the one thing to remember is we have, with our child porn cases and our sextortion cases, a lot of times we charge with either possession or distribution or what we call production. And once these photos, videos go out, a lot of times these predators will trade them with other predators. And a question we oftentimes get is, can we get those videos off the internet? Can we get those pictures off? We cannot. And they trade them. And a lot of times these types of images develop into what we call series. And there's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is a huge partner of ours, also referred to as NCMEC, and they basically compile all of these images and photos to help us identify the children that are victimized in these cases. It can be years down the road, and we'll come back and have, recently identified victims in these cases. So those are a couple of examples involving girls and boys. In terms of just sex trafficking in general, we have some that have been recruited on Facebook Messenger, Instagram, where it's, again, someone that is portraying themselves as someone completely different. And they have, again, done their homework. They know who this individual is friends with, and then may develop that relationship, and eventually we'll get them to meet them in person. And that's when things can get a little scary, because that person's now met this person. And I had a case, this was years back, but she was actually in middle school, and she was recruited through Facebook. And it was just that. They ended up meeting in person. And then next thing she knows, he's basically taken her back to his house. Turns out he was actually part of a gang, and he ended up forcing her to have sex with these men that he was basically bringing in for her. So then that's, turns into sex trafficking.
Yeah. Okay, so Aliyah, we are virtually out of time. I've made it halfway through the first page of 3 pages of questions that came in from everyone. So I don't know if we can do this again some other time as well. I know that next week we will be scheduling one that will be geared and targeting a little bit more towards children. We'll be announcing that with you on social media tomorrow. Before we wrap up, I just want to say, thank you very much for being here. Thanks for spending your time with us. Most importantly, thanks for what you and your team do every day. In the not-for-profit community, we can do so much, but we don't have badges and don't get to carry guns. And there's some stuff we can't do that you all in law enforcement can. I do want to ask you maybe one last question, if you want to think about it as I make a comment here real quick, and that is, what are 2 or 3 practical things that you would say people who care for kids, youth, teens, or parents or grandparents, what are 2 or 3 things that we can do today and tomorrow to kind of start this process? And before you answer that, I want to remind everybody, if you registered for this through Zoom, you will automatically get the packet of information that we will send out tomorrow that will recap this and have the information that Aliyah referenced. And I will tell you, you want to do that. We thought we had a comprehensive list of apps and social media applications until we saw Aliyah's. You want to get this, and you want to have it in your hands so that you can read through it and just learn about these different common apps that kids are finding themselves on. But again, thanks so much. But Aliyah, Final question, what are 2 or 3 practical things that folks could do today, tomorrow, to start this process wherever they are?
So quickly, I would say have the conversations with your kids if you haven't already. Be that intrusive parent. Be open if they tell you that something has happened and report it to law enforcement. I ask that you not delete any pictures, that you don't delete any videos. Do not try to conduct your own investigation, because that's all things that we will definitely need should it reach that level. Also, we provided a bunch of resources that will be given to you at the end of this, and familiarize yourself with those resources. So NetSmarts is a great one under NCMEC, the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. They have a whole section just specific to parents and online presence for kids. We have iGuardian, which is one resource that we have through Homeland Security Investigations, and we've got these cards that we also exchange. And I've got plenty of those. If you're interested, you can reach out to me, as well as some other pamphlets. In terms of human trafficking, we have the Department of Homeland Security Blue campaign, so you can look into that, as well as the Stop Trafficking campaign that we've got. That's our newest one, targeting the hotel, transportation, and healthcare industries. And so as long as you're keeping yourself up to date with what's going on in terms of social media, having those regular conversations with your kids, and again, familiarizing yourself with the resource list that we've provided you, I think that that'll be a good start. And you can always email me or call me if you have any questions. I have my phone on me 24/7, so I'm happy to entertain additional questions as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Aliyah. It really has your time with us has been a gift to so many. As we have navigated to so much stuff virtually, our Zoom platform that we launched a few weeks ago will accommodate up to 100, and that filled up really quickly. And so we transitioned over to Facebook Live and some other media platforms. So we will have that increased by the time that we get together next week, and then hopefully we might be able to have one more conversation at some point towards parents. But thank you very much for what you do. Thanks for being here with us. All of the information that Aliyah has just mentioned and more will be available to you in an email packet that will go out tomorrow with contact information and how you can continue to have this conversation at home in the appropriate way with the kids that you're responsible for and to care so deeply about. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. And remember, just do something in the next 24 hours. Start this process. Thanks for being with us.
Stay healthy, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much. Everyone be well.